Building a Tenor Guitar Part 29 at randallprice.com.
You know, it seems each step in building the tenor guitar requires some specialized jig, fixture, or tool, and this step is no exception. This is the fretboard, which I purchased from Stuart McDonald, and it is just a blank guitar fretboard. I'll put a link to that up on the website so you can find that. And I also bought another tool. This is a fret slotting saw, but the special thing about it is it's machined to a specific thickness. It's 23 thousandths of an inch, and the reason for that is the tang on the frets, which will go into the fretboard, require a 23 thousandths inch wide slot, so you need a specialized saw to cut those slots. Now you can also buy a miter box to go along with this fret saw, but I've chosen to build my own miter box, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. As I said, this is the fretboard, or sometimes called the fingerboard, and this will be slotted with a saw to accept the frets. This is a piece of fret wire. This is the fret itself, the part that will sit on top of the fretboard, and this piece fits into the fret slot. It's called a tang, and it's flat and it's got little barbs on the side of it, and it's just held in by friction into the fretboard. So I need to make a series of accurately cut slots perpendicular across the fretboard at given distances so that this fret wire will fit into that fretboard. This is a template that I made which indicates the spacing that I need for the fret slots, and I got these measurements directly off the blueprint. At the top of this blueprint is a table, and it shows you 1 through 20, each one of those being a fret, and the distance that fret has to be from the nut. So if you look at it here, here's the nut. There's number 1 fret, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, on down the fretboard. So the way that I made my template was I taped that down to my drafting board. You could use any board, and then I just measured out each one of these fret positions, and using my engineering square, just put that on the edge of my drafting board and mark those off. Now to measure those out, I used a 1/64 inch Incra T rule, and I use that just because I happen to have this in my shop, and it has accurately machined slots and holes down to every 64th of an inch. So I was able to lay this over the end of my drafting board, and I could mark down accurately to 1/64 of an inch. One other thing I had to do in order to do that was to convert the table on my blueprint, which is in decimal format, and convert that to 64ths of an inch. So in other words, this first fret is at 1.2909 inches from the nut. Well, I had to convert 1.2909 to 64ths of an inch. So on a spreadsheet, I just took 64ths of an inch from 1/64 down to 63/64 and converted that over to decimal format. Then I could just scan down this table and tell how many 64ths of an inch any given decimal format would be. And if you don't have a spreadsheet to set this up, I'll put this table on my website as well for you to download, so you'll have that too. I marked all those out. Once I had them all marked out, I went back again and rechecked them, and I had made a couple mistakes. So this is one of those cases where you want to measure twice, or maybe 3 or 4 times before you cut once, because you don't want to ruin your rosewood fretboard by being off on some of your marks. Another way to check the accuracy of your template is once you have it made, you could lay it alongside the fretboard on the blueprint and see if your match up to those. This is not accurate enough to use as a template, but it is a good guide to see if your frets are in the right place. A couple of these I just had misread and I fell in between two of the frets. So once I have my miter box made, I'll just stick my template directly on my fretboard, and I'll just use double face tape to stick that, and then I'll just cut my slots right where the lines fall using my miter box. So having made my template, the next task will be to make a miter box, and I will show you how I will do that next. For the base of my miter box, I just cut out a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, just a scrap that I had lying around, and it's about a foot long, and the only critical measurement for this would be it needs to be slightly wider than my fretboard, which it's about a 1/2 inch wider. Now for the sides of the miter box, I'll go over and set up my table saw to cut the sides of the miter box. So I just cut out a couple pieces of 1/2 inch plywood to use for the sides of my miter box. So I just clamp those together. I will screw the sides to the base, and then I'll be ready to cut the sides. There's the miter box. I'll add 2 more drywall screws to each side to hold that.
Next, I'll trim the 2 sides of the miter box down to an equal height.
Next, I'm going to cut my miter box in 2, which seems kind of like a crazy thing to do, but I'll explain why I'm doing that in just a minute. Okay, that seemed kind of like a drastic thing to be doing. If I went to trouble to make a miter box just to cut it in 2, the reason I did that was to make the kerf for the saw blade. Now I could have taken my saw and tried to keep it square and plumb and cut a kerf into there, but what I did instead is cut this in 2, and I'll place my saw between the 2 sides, pull that together, then I'll screw this miter box to the base, and then once I have it screwed together, I'll have a perfectly spaced kerf for the saw blade. And because I cut this over on my table saw using the crosscut sled, I got a perfectly square and perpendicular cut. So there's the countersinks. I'll go ahead and drill some pilot holes in there and screw those down. Now, I'm going to use this scrap piece of wood, which is a piece left from my neck blank, just to line everything up. I'll go ahead and screw one side down, and then I'll come back and put the saw in between the 2 pieces, and then screw the other side down. a little snug, but you should be able to just clear that out a little bit. There we go. Next I need to set the depth of cut. There the saw is lying on the top of the fretboard. I just want to cut probably no more than 1/8 of an inch, a deep slot in the fretboard. Actually, I need about 3/32, but I'll go ahead and do 1/8 of an inch. Move my saw out to one end. Have a 1/8 inch gauge block. Lay that on top of the miter box. Put my piece of wood on there. Holding everything down tight. I'll make a mark. Do the same thing at the back of the saw. Okay, so I have 2 lines that I can see. I will take some double-faced tape, put on the back of this wood, and stick it to the saw. Cut a length of double-faced tape, and I'll stick my wood to that. I'll just take a utility knife and trim that tape off. Just had to find a piece of wood to clamp my saw to so it wouldn't fall over when I'm trying to stick this piece of oak on here. Go. Stick that on there. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and make a test cut. So I'm going to go out here on the end. And as I said, I'm just testing for depth. I'm not clamping this into the miter box or anything right now. But I just want to see how deep this is going to cut. Okay. Actually, that is exactly 1/8 of an inch. Even so, I need to be about 3/32. So I'll probably move this piece that I stuck on here down, maybe 1/32 of an inch. Okay, I got that stop repositioned on my saw. I don't know if you can see this or not. The slot on the left, which is the new slot, is much more shallow than the one on the right, and I measured it against the fret, and it's perfect depth, so I got that set. One last thing I needed to do was to build a base for the miter box, and I just took a 2x4 block, drilled down through the miter box base, screwed the block to that, then took a piece of 1/2 inch plywood, screwed through the block that way. I can put this over on the edge of a workbench, clamp it down so the miter box doesn't move, and since I got that elevated, I'll be able to put the fretboard into the miter box and also clamp it in place so it won't move in the miter box, so everything's good and secure when I make the cut. Okay, so I hope to get a little bit farther in today's video than what I did, but it seems like these things always take a little bit longer than what you expect. But next time I'll be slotting the fretboard and then fitting it to the guitar neck, and maybe even getting the frets set into the fretboard. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching.